There are quite a few famous visual novel series, Code Realize, Memories of, Nekopara, so on, but how about visual novels from series that are usually known for something else? Well, we are here to surprise you with video game series that you did not know had a visual novel or two. I think the first example that many of you will be aware of by now is Radical Dreamers, a visual novel adventure game in the Chrono series, made between Trigger and Cross. I made a whole review about it, so I won't go into too much detail since you could just watch that review. But without further ado, let's get into some more game series you had no idea had a visual novel. For what it's worth, the majority of the games in this list are Japanese only. It's not a surprise, I would guess, but as a small silver lining, the community has stepped up with plenty of them getting unofficial fan translations. It's a little bit of a grey area, just remember that you should own an original copy of these games before tinkering with anything like that. And before we get into the list, of course, please subscribe if you like visual novels and hit that bell if you really like visual novels. I promise it will be the best thing you do today. Suikoden is one of my favorite games of all time. It's a great series with an 80% hit rate for the mainline series. Well, did you know that there's not one, but two text adventure games based on the franchise, both of which were released on the PlayStation. They are titled Genso Suikogaiden, Swordsman of Harmonia, and Volume 2 is Duel at Crystal Valley. As you may guess from the Gaiden title, these are a side story that's set within the Suikoden era, and it follows Nash, who would later go on to make an appearance in Suikoden 3. For some weirdly bizarre reason, I own both of these games, and I genuinely don't remember buying them. Silent Hill isn't a game that I've personally played. I was more of a Resident Evil guy as a kid. While the second game is the more highly rated, it's the first game in the series that received a peculiar visual novel rejig on the Game Boy Advance of all consoles. Yes, imagine the poor resolution of pre-rendered PS1 screens now in wonderful grainy glory on the Game Boy Advance. Well, I can't say that I played it on the GBA, but it looks like glorious ass when blown up. This has a few storylines and plenty of endings to help fill out that 2-hour base runtime, make decisions along the way, and see different points of view. I'm not sure how complete the English translation is, but it might be worth a check if you fancy knowing the Silent Hill story, but without having to wade through the archaic gameplay. Valis is known for being a series all about action platforming, arcadey in nature. I reviewed a whole collection of them on the Switch, but there's a rather elusive visual novel episode called Valis X. This has mostly been forgotten, probably down to it being a Nukige, and if you don't know what a Nukige is, don't Google it, you'll be put on an FBI list, I'm sure. Just watch our video about VN terminology, that will have you covered and save your search history shame. Now obviously I can't really show much of Valis X, and there's been no fan translation that I know of. Sega also got in on the action with visual novels. They're not afraid to dip their toes into the genre once in a while. One of their earlier efforts were a couple of adventure games based on the Phantasy Star series, beloved JRPGs. We've got Phantasy Star Adventure, which was a Game Gear game, and Phantasy Star 2 Text Adventure, which was released in multiple episodes over Sega's Meganet, which I believe was something similar to the Satellaview of the Super Nintendo. These were repackaged together a couple of times, firstly on the Mega CD, and then part of a Phantasy Star collection as part of their Sega Ages campaign on the PS2. These are certainly not worth fretting over missing, as they're all rather short and somewhat throwaway from what I've read upon. Let's go back to Konami for a second, it won't be the last one either. Zone of the Enders. Yeah, this is a mech shooter series that had a couple of games on the PS2. It had Kojima's name on the tin, but did you know that between Zone of Enders 1 and 2 there was a spin-off game on the Game Boy Advance, Zone of the Enders, The Fist of Mars. Fine, it is a massive stretch in terms of what a visual novel is, but VNDB claims that it is, and I'll give it a pass because it's interesting. It sure is narrative heavy, but it's basically a Super Robot Wars games with the Zone of the Enders franchise, a tactical RPG but with reams and reams of dialogue between missions. It actually looks pretty good, and a game I think I would rather enjoy, I'm sure. It also had a proper Western release to boot. Metal Gear Solid.
Metal Gear. It can't be.
Yes, good old Snakey has a visual novel of sorts as a video game, although this is branded as a graphic novel, a term for people who are too grown up to say comics. This is a rejig of the first Metal Gear Solid story into a graphic novel form, fantastic artwork, and of course a really good story. I think it's a fascinating release on the PSP and did see a Western physical. When you think of visual novels, there's always two words that come immediately to mind. Counter-Strike. Yes, Valve's famous shooter had a visual novel tie-in in Japan to help promote an upcoming Counter-Strike arcade game called Counter-Strike Neo. This episodic VN release was subtitled White Memories. These were made on Flash, so are playable on Flashpoint, but there was never any fan translations as far as I'm aware. You're not missing out, it's just really interesting. A lot of people love the Atelier games, the JRPG series from Gust and Koei. I've reviewed pretty much all of them that are available on the Nintendo Switch, but it may or may not surprise you that there are a couple of visual novels produced for the series. Firstly, one on the PS2, which involves an Atelier called Hermina, who created a small human-like creature who then learns to communicate by interacting with his creator. The second is a bit more well known since it came after the series started taking off in the West, alongside visual novel genre as a whole, and this is an Otome, actually made by Otomate, the kings of AAA Otome games. El Corone no Atelier Dia for Otomate. It actually looks really good, and I think Atelier fans and Otome fans would be in heaven with this release, but sadly, it doesn't look like there's a fan translation around. Disgaea Infinite is probably the most high-profile release on this list because NIS America were ballsy enough to give it a full release on the PSP, physically and everything, and didn't even attempt to mitigate the incoming confusion of Disgaea fans who picked it up and wondered where the tactical gameplay went. This is a humorous adventure game with none of the Disgaea gameplay you'll be used to. This is only controlling the story, choosing what to say and do. It's quite short but relies on multiple endings to add to the length. And finally, let's end with a bonus entry, number 11. Ghostwire Tokyo isn't a really famous game series since there's only one game, but as a AAA title, you may be surprised to learn that it got a very short visual novel as a bit of a promotion in the run-up to the game's release, called Ghostwire Tokyo Prelude. This is less than an hour long and supposedly a bit pants, but it's such a weird, surprising release I wanted to make sure you guys knew about it. And there we have it, VN fans. Which of these did you already know? Did any of them take your fancy? Will you be prowling the internet for any of them? I would love to know your thoughts. Be sure to subscribe, hit that bell, and check out some of our other content. We've got some quirky stuff like all the visual novels on the 3DS, on the Vita, and plenty more to come. Go delve into our back catalogue. There'll surely be something that you enjoy. We'll see you guys over there. Have a good one.